So fast forward, I go to jail. I get out of jail. I hear what the charges are against me, and the state really wanted to make an example out of us, and particularly me. So they were suggesting that I spend 12 years in federal prison to atone for my sins. And that was terrifying, and very real, very, very real. I don't think I knew when I was doing it that it would come with such a heavy sentence. I also don't know if it would have stopped me, to be very honest. At some point, I lost all power of choice, and I was just going down this road, and I just was feeding this need. And at some point, I did want to be done with it. I did want to be honest, and I just wanted to not be controlled by this substance that was stealing my life away. I had a couple of near death experiences where I almost overdosed, and they were very sad and very scary. And those didn't stop me either. So at some point, and I don't know exactly when it happened, but I did lose all control. And once that happened, there was really only one way out for me. I thought it was death. And when I got arrested, something changed.
Sometimes my favorite words in life are take two. So here we go. Everybody back at one. The word vulnerable is defined as susceptible to physical or emotional attack or harm. So if being vulnerable means you're opening up yourself to possibility of attack or harm, why in the world would we ever want to be vulnerable? Because I believe growth and authenticity are on the other side of opening up and being vulnerable. So that's our focus today on Coz TV and the Coz Green audio experience. Welcome, my friends. Thank you for being here today. We're going to get vulnerable with each other. And I've got a guest for you that I know you are absolutely going to love. You see, I believe that authenticity is a superpower. Now, in an age of fake book and Insta scam, we crave real connection in today's world, especially after the pandemic when we were put aside and separated from the world. We had this need to get back together, and we really need connection. And human connection is the most basic need. And I'm afraid, as we said in our last episode, most people don't even have one friend that they could call at 3 o'clock in the morning when they're stuck on the freeway. What a tragedy. If the great business of life is to develop loving relationships and most people don't have a handful, what a tragedy. We know that no one is exempt from struggles or challenges. We know the gem cannot be polished without friction, or man be perfected without trials. So we are here on this crazy earth to learn and to grow from each other. Everyone is a teacher, and we have choices every day to be kind and lovable. Now, recently, I was a speaker at a conference to help others develop a higher sense of personal worth. And I shared the platform with my guest today, and I was instantly drawn to her light and her authenticity. And you're going to see what I mean very shortly. My guest is a dynamic keynote speaker and expansion strategist whose journey is a testament to resilience, passion, and the power of connection. From her early dreams of performing on stage to hitting a rock bottom, to ultimately achieving significant milestones through mentorship, pageantry, and business, she has discovered that true fulfillment lies in helping others remember their own greatness. Amen. She is a recovering addict, alcoholic. She proudly celebrates 9 years of sobriety. She placed in the top 6 at Mrs. America, representing addicts in recovery. As a speaker, she engages audiences across the United States with her inspiring story and insights. She holds a background in psychology and counseling, enhancing her ability to connect deeply with her audience and her clients. Personally, she is a devoted wife and the mother of 2 teenage boys and is passionate about freedom and creation. My guest today joins us from her home in Pittsburgh, Kansas. Friends, help me welcome Robin Brock. Robin, welcome to the program.
Hello, Coz and audience. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a few weeks since I saw you.
It has. Yeah. How many weeks now?
I
4?
don't know.
3?
Yeah, it's been a month or so, and I just couldn't wait for us to have a chat and for the audience to get to know you better and just hear more about your story. When you got up there at the Worthy Up Unleashed Symposium, I knew I had met a kindred spirit. I truly believe that we, all of us, have a frequency, and you share a frequency that I just identify with because you are real and authentic. So thanks for spending a few minutes with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And if I can, just for a moment, also echo those sentiments. I mean, your light was magnetizing when I walked into that space. I had never met you before, and I was just in for the surprise of my life because you were so warm and open, and you remained that way and so present with every speaker. And I just appreciated you being in that room. And then when you took the stage and brought out the tuning fork and the radio, I knew we were in alignment for sure. And I was just shaking my head the whole time. Yep, yep, yep. Love that. And you brought some great information and shared your story too. So thank you. It was an honor to be there.
Well, let's start right there with authenticity and coattail on that whole topic of just being worthy. That seems to be such a common theme on all of these programs recently. And I know you listened to my recent episode with Cassie Collister and felt a connection there. What holds people back from feeling worthy and enough in your estimation?
That's a really great question. And we talk about it a lot in a lot of different spaces. I have to say that in my experience, I'm really careful to not make assumptions about why somebody would feel unworthy, because I guess it's more of my nature, my human nature, to project my past experiences onto what I think your experience is. And so it all starts from this idea of separation. We're born from one into this world on this planet. And then there are different things, programs that are reinforced over time that convince us that we're separate. And I think that it's possible the source of all suffering starts in that moment when we start to feel separate. So I think that it probably begins somewhere in this separateness and thinking that I'm separate from another and I'm so unique, and we are unique. We have different expressions that we express our soul's mission through, and that's what makes it really interesting, all these different flavors of people in the world. But feeling that you're chronically unique is very isolating, and it can really be paralyzing.
Feeling chronically unique. I never heard
Yeah.
that before. I like that. Well, there was
Thanks.
a time in your life when you felt alone and lost. I recently read a transcript of an interview that you did that may ultimately turn into a greater work for you as a memoir. The thing that blew me away when you got up on the platform at the Worthy Up Unleashed Symposium was, here you are, a beautiful, very well put together, articulate, just polished gem. And then you told a story that absolutely blew me away. Would you be willing to take us back to that dark night of the soul when you had to say, I am guilty, and what that meant to you?
Yes, of course. It's so interesting. I was just talking with someone last night, a new friend, and we were just having a discussion, and she asked sort of about, how do you find the courage to tell the story over and over again? And how do you find the courage to put yourself out there and be vulnerable? And I just explained that every time I tell this story, every time I tell the truth about where I came from, not only does it change perceptions and open hearts, hopefully, to not judge people by the way that they look or the way that they speak or the things that they have, but it also gives me the power of my own story back, right? And so every time I tell the story, I get a little bit more free. So thank you for the opportunity to share it here. this particular dark night of the soul, which is very dramatic, and there have been many in my lifetime, and I'm probably not done yet, but this particular one was a doozy. So I was a stay-at-home mom. I homeschooled. I had two boys who were younger at the time, was married, and it was complicated. I was married to a federal agent. I had a dental procedure done while the boys were at a co-op program, and I was going to go pick them up. It should have just been a quick in and out procedure. And what ended up happening was I had a botched root canal. I ended up taking pain medication for that. And let me tell you, that was the perfect storm. So I was already on anxiety medication. And when I paired the painkillers and the increased dose that eventually came, they had me take 2 at a time. And in that moment, I just felt this warmth all over me, and all of the problems that I had been experiencing personally, the lack of purpose that I felt inside, the shame that I felt for feeling that lack of purpose, knowing that I was being a mom and all the things that I was supposed to be doing, all of that melted away. And I felt this intense sense of euphoria. And from that moment, a love affair sparked. And I thought, oh, where has this been my whole life? This is the answer to everything, and it really started to run the show from that moment. All I could think about was when I was going to get to take medication again, and I would count my pills and I would hoard them, and then I would take them all. And the end of the story goes like this. I was taking 30 painkillers a day. My eyes were yellow. My skin was swollen. I wasn't doing well at all, as you can imagine. It took about 6 months, and it ended in me being arrested in a CVS parking lot for forging prescriptions. And I should probably mention at this point that I was married at the time to a federal agent. So that definitely complicated things. I was keeping secrets and trying to hide and trying to function and look like I had it all together, but I was absolutely falling apart inside and didn't know how to get out, did not know how to ask for help because it was such a shame story. And I believe that the shame really perpetuated the illness and kept me sick, or, longer than I needed to be. So fast forward, I go to jail. I get out of jail. I hear what the charges are against me, and the state really wanted to make an example out of us, and particularly me. So they were suggesting that I spend 12 years in federal prison to atone for my sins, and that was terrifying. And very real, very, very real. I don't think I knew when I was doing it that it would come with such a heavy sentence. I also don't know if it would have stopped me, to be very honest. At some point, I lost all power of choice, and I was just going down this road, and I just was feeding this need. And at some point, I did want to be done with it. I did want to be honest, and I just wanted to not be controlled by this substance that was stealing my life away. I had a couple of near death experiences where I almost overdosed, and they were very sad and very scary, and those didn't stop me either. So at some point, and I don't know exactly when it happened, but I did lose all control. And once that happened, there was really only one way out for me. I thought it was death. And when I got arrested, something changed. That night, a bunch of women that were in the holding cell actually sat around me and told me their stories. And a lot of them were addicted too. And they told me how they started. They told me their dreams for their lives, like what they had been involved with before they went down this road. And they essentially told me everything that was waiting for me on the other side of this addiction. If I moved from pills to the next street drug, because you have to do that, the efficacy of the drug wears off and the effects that you're craving eventually go away. And this thing that was your best friend abandons you completely. And you wonder how you're going to survive. And your body goes into horrific flu-like symptoms. And you're just serving this disease. You're serving this drive, this need for more, and you're not able to be present in your own body anymore. They really painted a clear picture of what that was going to look like if I didn't get help and what I would have to move on to. They were very honest about how they'd lost their children, how they were only looking forward to going to prison. These were women that shared their heartache with me, a complete stranger who really would have walked all the way around them earlier in the day because they were scary. They broke my heart open, and they actually poured life into me and begged me to save my own life. That's a very humbling moment. You're already humbled sitting on that jail floor, with sacks of peanut butter and bread and orange and milk, and terrified and sick, coming down off of whatever you're coming down off of. And for these women to rally around me and say, this is what you're looking at, please save your own life. That was all the convincing I needed. That was the moment. I knew I had to get out. I knew very much that I wanted to live. I just didn't know how. And so I'd really given up. I had pleaded with God. I had stomped and cried on my closet floor, of course, in secret, because nobody could know. That was the moment. I got out of jail and I started looking at treatment centers, and it takes a while, but I was able to get into one, and I got into treatment, did everything that was required of me, learned a lot about the masks I was wearing. I was very confused about that term because I really thought I was being honest. The delusion is so thick that I really believed I was being as honest as I could be, and probably I was. But even that was just a beginning to peeling back the layers and the years of performing and approval seeking and people pleasing that I had been doing. I got out of treatment. I got a sponsor. I kept going to program. She worked me through these steps that are in this program that's anonymous. Some of you may be familiar. And sitting at her table, going through my 5th step and talking about all the things that I would never tell anyone, and sharing those things with her. It was the first time I felt, probably really the first time I felt unconditional acceptance and love from another. It's not to say I didn't have it growing up at points, but this was real and raw, and I was completely open and honest. And that really trained me to start being more open, honest, willing. So we start doing the steps. I'm going through different trial dates. It's all getting pushed and pushed and pushed. And I show up and it's extended, and, several things happen. But long story short, 6 months into my sobriety, I had my court date, and I showed up, and my attorney really wanted me to plead not guilty and kind of blame the system and doctors for overprescribing opiates, which is a thing, and that's valid. And at the same time, there was a point where I was still consciously choosing to avoid my feelings and use this substance. Nobody held me down and stuck me with a needle. Like, there was a point where I realized I really like this and I want to keep this up. So I wanted to take responsibility for that. Taking responsibility and rigorous honesty were things I learned in this program. And I really wanted to practice that. So I said, all right, we're going to plead guilty, actually, because I did it. So I had the chance to speak in front of the judge. It was a very scary moment. That judge and the state prosecutor literally held my fate in their hands. And I walked in there and I just said, I'm guilty. I did it. And so I do plead guilty. And they let me speak, and I was allowed to advocate for myself and say that, I would love the opportunity to continue this program outside of prison. And I would always chase recovery and help all the women that I possibly can along the way. and I would love to do it, not incarcerated, but I would if I needed to. And I had really come to terms with the fact that if I went to prison, then that was a place that I was supposed to be. And I had truly, truly surrendered to it. So when the judge crossed through the suggested sentence and they let me know that they were going to sentence me to a year probation, my jaw was on the floor, truly on the floor. I didn't really know, how to even receive that. I think about it now when my days are hard, because I do have a lot of joy in my life. That doesn't mean life is perfect. And on my hardest days, I think about it. And just being in Arizona this past weekend, I looked to the north of the state where the women's prison is, and I thought, I would still have 3 years left on my sentence right now. And as painful as it would be to still be in there, as my oldest son is a senior this year and is graduating, thinking about all the missed opportunities that there would have been for me to speak life into women out here on the outside, it's a big deal. So I am really grateful to have had the opportunity to continue to do the next right thing, not incarcerated and free. There are so many miracles. It would take days to go through this podcast to unlock them all. But I was able to leave the state. All of my rights were restored to me. I can vote. I can carry a weapon if I choose to, it's still there if you look, and I'm not trying to hide it from anyone, but I've been restored and I continue to be restored. Restoration is a impactful word for me. And that's the journey that I'm on. And I hope that my life can be an example to others who are being restored in their own ways.
You talked about masks a few minutes ago, and something in you changed when you talked about masks. What mask were you wearing, and how did that affect you? Why was that so hard to not be your secrets anymore?
I started with a willingness when I came to treatment. And then the director would say, Robin, you just need to take off the mask. You just need to show up and take off the mask. And I'm like, I don't know what else to do. I'm here and I'm present and I'm with you guys and I'm doing the coursework and I'm not wearing makeup. And, I don't know what else that means. And over time, I have come to understand more of what it means. Do I understand it fully? Probably not. But what does it mean is, I think that we're born with a certain level of mask. As soon as we're in human form, as Ram Dass says, we're all God in drag, and so we're all wearing a mask of some sort, a complete body costume, really. But it went way deeper than that for me. And so I think probably at that time, it was just years and years and years of adding things to my persona that I thought people wanted me to be.
Were you a people pleaser?
Oh, 100%. Fully committed, proud, card carrying people pleaser. Like, you just tell me what you want. I will be that. Move the bar. I'll jump higher. I'll do better. I will perform. I will, I'll make you so happy. You're going to want me around. And I just really wanted to be accepted and wanted. I think probably at some point in some way we all do. And so anything that people would suggest or even insinuate they wanted me to do, and maybe they weren't insinuating, maybe I was just reading into it, I would take that on and become that. And it worked really well for me. It was a great survival technique in early childhood. I just wanted people to keep me. I just wanted to keep sticking around and have a stable place and have a safe place. And that did serve me well as a survival technique in early childhood. But then I began to really wear that, oh, Robin, you're such an old soul. You're so grown up, and you're really the mother to your mom, aren't you? And I would wear that with pride. Like, yes, I'm so grown up. And then by the time everything came crashing down and the life that I built, which absolutely was going to be perfect, and I was going to have the perfect marriage and the perfect children, and I was going to be the dedicated mother and never do anything wrong and just never let my marriage fall apart and, all these things right, because I wanted to do the opposite of what I had seen in my childhood. And so I allowed a lot of things to happen that did not feel good to my soul. They didn't feel good in my gut. And I just kept allowing myself to make concessions and sacrifices that really didn't feel good to me. I sacrificed a lot so that I could keep things together and keep the peace. And I didn't have boundaries. So yeah, my mask was, who do you want me to be today? There's a song that talks about Marilyn Monroe, and it talks about, she'll be who you want her to be. And when I heard those lyrics for the first time, I was already in recovery, but I was like, wow, yeah, that's it. That's what it was. And so forever, I'm always pulling off the mask, because I do a lot of studying about these sort of concepts. And I think about the ego, and we talk about the ego death and things like that. But does the ego ever really die? Or does it just transform? And do we take on new challenges that we have to become aware of and work through? So yeah, there's a mask. There's always some sort of mask.
I don't know that you can identify a day or a season, but can you remember a time where you went from, and I'm not suggesting you loathe yourself, but it's hard as a people pleaser to like yourself, love yourself. It really is, because again, you're wearing masks and you're trying to be everything to everybody. Therefore, you're nothing to nobody. But can you identify a point in your life where that changed for you, and you set the boundary that you weren't going to be a people pleaser anymore, that you were doing this for you, and that you liked or loved yourself? Was there something that changed?
Oh yeah, there were a lot of things that changed.
Tell us about that.
Okay, great question. I think the beginning, the very beginning would be when I was in treatment and we started learning about, they brought up the word codependency. And I was both thrilled and terrified, because I had a feeling that my relationship was codependent, and I didn't really want to know that, because I really just wanted to go into treatment and fix myself and get out and fix my marriage, and then everything would be fine again, and then we could just keep it all the same. But in treatment, doing all the work and the groups and going to the meetings outside of the treatment center, interacting with those people, I started to feel this life, this joy welling up in my gut. And I remember calling my now ex-husband and saying, I hope you're ready, because when I get out of here, I'm going to be like a wild racehorse. And the reason I said that was because it dawned on me that I never truly knew who I was before I got married, before I had children, before any of the grown-up things happened, even in adolescence, especially in adolescence. I never really truly knew who I was. I knew who I wanted to be, sort of, but I didn't really know what my gifts were, what my purpose was, what my interests were, what foods I like, what my boundaries were. I didn't know any of that stuff. And so in treatment, we really started to talk about those things, and we started to explore them. And I started to make lists of things, and, my understanding of God and what my relationship with God would look like. And I mean, it was kind of like all bets were off. We were starting at ground zero and rebuilding again. And that was really exciting for me. And the more I got into that, I thought, oh gosh, I think I really like myself. I don't know why yet. And I don't know everything that she's got going on, but I think she's really cool. And I think I'm really going to like hanging out with her and getting to know her. And I just felt this draw to life and to getting to know myself, not because it was the right thing to do, not because someone at church told me to, not because Oprah said to. I just felt like the more honest I got and the more I was able to offload all of this shame and guilt and supposed tos and shoulds, I felt more and more like I was getting down to the core of what I was actually capable of. And before that, it had just been a dull ache in the back of my mind that was like, you're not doing it. You're not living up to your potential. Don't squander your gifts. I heard that in my spirit for years. Don't squander your gifts. Don't squander your gifts. Don't squander your gifts. But looking around, I kept thinking, this is all I have. What do you mean don't squander my gifts? This is all the best. I'm doing the best I know how to do with what I have. So let me answer your question. It started in treatment. And then it really magnified as I worked the steps, and sitting at that little table with my sponsor and walking through step 5, which is where we take an inventory of all of the things that we're never going to tell anyone, essentially, right? All the things we could be carrying guilt or shame over. And we tell it to another human in a safe space, in a confidential space. The level of freedom that I felt leaving her house that night is still really indescribable. But it was a frequency, it was a vibration, and I could feel it, raising. And it's such an odd place to be because there's no answers on the other side of it. There's no answers that say, gosh, once you do this, then you're going to do these things and you're going to end up at this destination. It's really just more like, okay, you're going to run up the hill as fast as you can. And when you get to the end, you're going to leap and you're going to let the wind catch you where you are and carry you. And your whole life, you're afraid of that. And you know that you're supposed to, or you know that you want to. And then you run up the hill and your sponsor is walking you through it and she's holding your hand and she said, I did it too. And this is what my life looks like now. And this is how I did it. And so you run up that hill with her and she's like clapping for you as you take the leap, and you just, and the air catches you. And that's what it feels like. That's when I really started to discover who I was. And that doesn't mean that I've discovered that yet. But I think I discover it more and more every year. Through every challenge and every victory. There's been so many things that have happened since then. I moved. It was really fast. It was a fast move. I changed my boy's entire life in the course of a couple of days. It was hard. It was painful. We rebuilt here. We changed everything about the way that we live. And I'm not a stay-at-home mom anymore. I mean, incrementally changes have happened. I went back to work. I've changed my career several times, and I just keep growing and growing and growing and trusting and trusting and trusting. And it's like the next phase of discovering who I am is always on the other side of a really, really deep surrender. But see, none of that would have been possible had I not had these experiences and this learning how to love myself and trust myself. And the good news is that I really do love myself. I really do. And what I know about her so far is a lot of things. She's creative and she's wild and she's kind of a rebel, but she loves people and she's very connected and she is intertwined into the heart of the creator, and her heart beats with his, it's, hers, whatever you want to say. But this this life is so short and fragile, I'm also not so attached to that anymore. I love it, and I'm so happy to be here, and I'm going to live it for all that it is. But I've really started to release expectations on how that should look. And in program, they say expectations are premeditated resentments. And it took me a while to get with that, but it's true. There are reasonable expectations. I expect that I can walk outside of my house and not be murdered to go get the mail. That's reasonable. But there are other expectations that are not. So we learn the difference between those things. People pleasing, it's an interesting journey for me, because what we learn in program is that often the things that we call character defects in program, which do not mean you're a defective human, by the way, are actually your gifts, just taken to extreme.
How so?
So people pleasing is actually on my list. And I took it to extreme because I had such low self-worth, such low self-esteem, that I used my ability to connect with people to manipulate you into liking me by selling a version of myself that you can connect with. Oh, you love that? I love that. You're into that? Me too. Tell me more about that. I'll just become whatever you want me to be. And that's not a sustainable way to connect in relationships. That's what I learned. The gift of people pleasing is this: I have an innate desire to connect to other human beings on this planet. Not everybody does. That's not everyone's calling in life. We want some level of connection, and that's great. My desire is to connect to as many people and share my story and speak life and hear your story and know what made you get to where you're at. Like, that is my gift. That's one of like a few that I have. But I took it to another level because I didn't know myself yet. So because I had these traits of needing to be needed or needing to have that approval because I didn't have it for myself yet, I used my gift to get you to like me. And the problem with that is that at some point in that relationship, it will become unbalanced in such a way that you will never be able to please me enough, because I will need more and more and more and more from you to feel like I'm enough. And you'll never be able to sustain it. But when I'm in charge of my own health, when I'm in charge of my own emotions, when I'm in charge of my own behaviors and I'm responsible for them, then I take responsibility for that in my life. And I appreciate you for being exactly who you are in this moment with no expectation. And not only does that allow me to be open to love and receive you and to be with you fully, but it allows you to feel safe in my presence because you don't unconsciously sense that I need something from you.
That is very powerful. Thank you. And one thing that I'm noticing from when we spent time together on the platform, especially today, which makes you different, I don't hear any victim speak. You said earlier when you told the story of being there, standing before the judge with 12 years in federal prison facing you, and you just said, I'm responsible. I am guilty. Not many people can do that in today's world.
Yeah. Well, it's understandable.
Was that a big step to say, I am responsible?
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you, when I first found out that I was looking at that, my first reaction was, okay, we have family in Scotland. We're moving to Scotland. Everybody pack your stuff. Here we go. Like, we're getting out of here. And we'll just live on the run for the rest of our lives. It'll be fine. I literally felt that way. When I got into program, when I got into recovery, they started saying things like, here was the most triggering one, and a trigger warning to anyone out there who is victimized, because there are victims out there of horrific crimes. But one of the sayings is victims don't get recovery. And the victim part of me at that time did not like hearing that. And it sounds very insensitive. And if you are sitting at home right now listening to this and you're thinking, well, I didn't ask for that to happen to me, and some violence was thrust upon you, you're right, you didn't. And I want to validate that and acknowledge it. But human beings, this is what I've come to understand so far. Human beings are the only animals on the planet that experience something and punish themselves 1,000,000 times over for it. If a dog gets its paw stepped on, or someone beats it or shoots it, it will get over that. Nature accepts the consequences of whatever action there was, and then they move on with it. They don't relive it and bring it up and let it manifest in them and become disease and resentment. They don't create a new identity around that. The dog doesn't say, okay, well, now I'm a beaten dog and I've got to run away from home and go, do all these things to make my life look a certain way because that's who I am now. And yet, as humans, we do have a tendency to do that. So I became aware of it. I became aware of my responsibility and my part in everything. So in this idea of victims don't get recovery, we talk about taking responsibility. And one of the biggest principles that we're taught early on is rigorous honesty. This is a new concept to me at this point when I'm getting into recovery, right? Because it was always tell people what they want to hear, protect their feelings, like don't really tell the truth because, only talk about the pretty things, only talk about the things that people want to hear about, and don't bother them with that. And, don't have too many emotions, and, all of the things that probably all of you have experienced in your life. But we're taught rigorous honesty, and it's rigorous, not brutal. I want to point that out because brutal honesty is, I really hate your hair. You'd look a lot better if, you dye it black and, cut it to here or something. There's no brutality in honesty. The nature of honesty is actually not brutal at all. The nature of honesty is very loving and caring. So that's what I've come to learn. So I thought, okay, let me meditate on this term. Let me really get into this term of rigorous honesty. What does that mean? And it means that it's freaking work, because the way that I was taught, the way that I even taught myself how to live, how to show up, how to perform, was not honest. There was honesty in it, but it was not honest and open, not all the time. And no one's going to be honest 100% of the time. That's an unrealistic expectation. But to work towards that and to always be aware, that's a big deal. So rigorous honesty is, okay, am I being honest? Am I being honest to myself? Am I really saying what I want to say? Am I really saying yes to the things I want to say yes to? Am I really calling myself out on the things that are unhealthy for me and my family, whatever? And so that rigorous honesty really opened me up to the fact that, okay, now I can hear some truths about how I was perpetuating trauma from my younger years and repeating those cycles in my adult years, trying to live them out with a win at the end. So the things that were done to me as a child, I was unconsciously trying to recreate those scenarios and live them out with a victory at the end. I was choosing people to be a part of my life who exhibited those same characteristics because they were familiar, but they had a different face or a slightly different angle, or maybe a healed appearing version of it, right? And I wanted to be the one to help them get better, because if I could just do that, then I would be enough. And what we learn in recovery is that when you're no longer the victim, You're in the driver's seat of your life. Now, that sounds really liberating at first. It's what we think we all want. But when you really look at it, it means I'm actually responsible for my own life. And so when something is done that I'm not a fan of, it is my responsibility to be honest and speak up about it. That is rigorously honest. And it's not always comfortable to let people know that you're going to have to change or move a boundary or implement a boundary, but it is the most loving. As a result of this, over and over and over, little baby steps in my life, I now have an experience where I don't believe I'm in control of the world, but I am in control of the way, of course, that I respond to it. And I'm able to express how I feel in any given moment. As a result of that, the people who are near me have the luxury of always knowing where they stand. I don't require anyone to read between the lines. When I mess up, I want to know about it. I want to take accountability for it, and I want to rectify it.
Let's unpack a couple of big words that you threw out a few minutes ago that not everybody understands the same way you and I do. Okay. And that is that whole frequency and vibration. So let's talk about that. And then just in case I forget, I want to talk about surrender. So you talk about this rigorous honesty. And I guess it's been an aha for me recently to realize that this rigorous honesty is actually a vibration. Right? Because the world itself is living in dishonesty, inauthenticity, fakeness, all those other things. And I think therefore they literally vibrate at a frequency of that. And the imposter syndrome only increases when people are living that way. So for our viewers and listeners that aren't as familiar as you and I with frequency and vibration, because I'm introducing it as quickly as I can to the world, but sometimes maybe I'm not as well versed. Help our viewers and listeners understand what that means to you, frequency and vibration, and how literally when you changed and you became this honest self, how you literally attracted a whole different world into your existence.
Oof, that's moving. Thank you. Thank you for that question. Okay. So a lot of people talk about vibration and frequency. I think the word that we hear more often is probably manifestation. And the movie The Secret really popularized and brought that into our mainstream consciousness. You know, just picture it and believe it, and you'll have it, anything you want. And that is true to a point.
However,
yeah, it's a great place to start. However, I will say that I think that human beings all have different capacities for the energetic frequencies that they will hold. Not to say that we can't always raise our vibration and become the highest expression of what we were created for. However, not everyone is going to vibrate at the same frequencies, because that would be so boring. It would be so boring if all of us were just walking around as the same thing. Why would we even need to be here? So frequency and vibration. Here is probably the simplest explanation I can think of. Einstein said, everything is energy. So if you just get with that for a second, everything. This bottle cap right here that goes to my water, it's energy, and it is solidified molecules that are all vibrating and bouncing around at a certain frequency to create this solid matter. He also said that the solution to every challenge already exists. Now, this is where it gets really juicy. So if the solution to every challenge already exists, then there really is a world all around us that we can't see or feel. Some of us can feel it. but some of us aren't aware of it yet. And it's all around us. It's constantly vibrating and moving. And that's frequency. And like you said at the conference, at the symposium, you turned on a radio and you turned the dial and you said, okay, if you don't want to listen to this station anymore, then all you have to do is slightly change the dial and then you're on another station. And that is such a great explanation for how this works. So how do you change the frequency that your antenna, which is your body, receives and transmits? How do you really do that? And there are scriptures and there are teachings all over the world that talk about different ways that we can honor the body temple. And those are all very helpful. But I think that if the solution to every challenge already exists all the way around us, Einstein says all we have to do is realize that the solution to every challenge exists at a higher level of consciousness than which it was created. Wow. So it's already there. All we have to do is flip the dial. Now that sounds very simple, doesn't it? And actually it is. I think the struggle comes in my experience, with actually being disciplined enough to shut my body up, to shut my human mind up and put it in the car seat, as I describe it often. Just put her in the car seat, lock her in. You're safe back there. You're going to be fine. I'll come get you when your timeout's over. But right now you're going to take a little time out and we're going to tap into something bigger. And all of your little wants and desires, talking about me, my mind, my foot's going numb. I'm thirsty. Did I answer that email? All of those things have to be trained to, okay, we will answer all of your questions. We will deal with all of those issues in 5 minutes, I promise. But for 5 minutes, we're just going to be still and we're going to be present with the presence. And that raises my vibration because I've tapped into my own energy. I've tapped into the energy of the creator of infinite possibilities, literally infinite possibilities. And so in that moment, when I start to believe, wait, I think something more is possible here. Wait a second, there definitely is. And then my brain says, but what is it? What's the answer? How do we get there? I need a roadmap. I need a timeline, a PowerPoint presentation. What are we going to do here? And my spirit says, we're going to roll with it. We're going to welcome it all in. And that's what I've done. I have literally, you guys, it makes no sense the way that my life has unfolded. And it won't be like this for everyone, but there can be a level of, it's like magic, but it's not magic. It's just the magic of letting go of the mind and the mind's need to know everything, to feel safe. That is the exact opposite of authenticity. The mind is here to serve my soul, not the opposite.
A few years ago, when I learned the word surrender, and our listeners have heard this before, I always thought surrender meant wave the white flag and just give up. But you're right, it's magic. And there's no way to describe it other than magic, in that it's this illusion, but it actually happens when you surrender and you go with flow, how just everything changes. We've all seen those circles before, the area of control, the area of influence, and the area of concern. And when you realize that ultimately that area of control is about this big, and then your desire for your area of influence constricts, and then and it's not that you don't care about the world, but your area of concern for everything, because you realize you can't influence or control it anyway, just changes. And you come to this place of peace and understanding. I just wish I would have learned it earlier. And so for you tuning in today, and that's the operative word, tuning in. It's not just about being here, but tuning into what we're talking about. I just want you to know there is amazing peace and love and joy and contentment when you tune in to this surrender experiment. and what's possible. So for many of you that may not make any sense whatsoever. For you that are embarking on this, I would just say continue in your journey. So build on that a little bit from your perspective, Robin, about how did your life change when you surrendered to flow? And we said that today when we texted each other to make sure we're on for this interview. And we just said, we're just going to be in flow. It's going to be interesting to see what unfolds. And it was just flow is the topic. What does that mean to you? And how's that really affected your life throughout all this?
Yeah, thank you. It has affected everything. It's changed everything. And it also when I don't. So there can be an expectation at times that once you realize that surrender, it can be seductive to think that you just stay there, right? So now life is good. I'm on easy street. It's not exactly how it goes. And that's part of the human condition, is to take the power back and not even know that you've done it. At least for me. So taking the power back and the control and thinking that I have surrendered. And then I realize, okay, I'm suffering. And today my capacity for suffering is so much lower than it was before. So before, I really was into suffering. Suffering was a great reason to connect with friends and tell them about all the suffering, right? And commiserate together. And today I just don't have an appetite for that anymore. And I'm not interested in suffering at all. I mean, I'll do what I have to, but just because things are difficult doesn't mean I have to suffer. I get to choose how I interpret every single experience, even the painful ones. And even the painful experiences have tremendous value. And the only thing that makes them bad is the fact that they were labeled bad, and I agreed to label them bad as well. Maybe they're just experiences. So to that point, surrender. When I start to notice that I am feeling agitated or restless or discontent, I can pretty well bet that there's a surrender coming. And that's exactly how it started in my life. I mean, first I surrendered and I went to jail. So that's a pretty good surrender. And then I was going to surrender to prison and surrender to starting my life over again and to taking whatever job I could get. And that kind of surrender really looked like, I'm going to say yes because it feels good, even though it doesn't make sense and it doesn't feel like a very important job. I'm going to say yes to it. And the surrender came in the humility of bowing down to the greatness of a waitress job in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, in a tiny cafe that serves the same 20 customers every single day, and showing up and giving it everything I have, looking those people in the eye and pouring that coffee with intention, making sure that I'm adding more value than I'm taking. That's what it started to do. Surrender looks like letting go of that job, even though I love everyone there and they come to my kids' birthday parties. And I love the owner and we're all like family now, but it's time to grow. Letting go of that job and moving on when it feels more safe to stay. Surrender looks like going to those trainings at the new job and learning a skill that I've never done before and trusting that my instincts and my intuition and my gifts and blessings will take me exactly where I need to go when I rely on a power greater than myself to guide my steps. Surrender looks like letting go of that job and jumping off another cliff and saying yes to the next thing. As soon as that growth point comes, surrender is just saying yes. Motherhood, parenthood is surrender, constant surrender. You surrender to birth. I remember when I had my oldest son, and I was supposed to have a C-section the next day, which I really didn't want to have. I really wanted to have a natural birth. But the doctor said he's 10 pounds. He's already got to be over 10 pounds. And we have to do something. So you can't have a natural birth because it's not going to work. And so we're going to have a C-section. And so I went into labor anyway, early. And I get to the hospital and the doctor is there and we're trying to decide what to do. And he said, well, if you want to try a natural birth, I'll stay here and hang out with you all night. And he explained to me how that would probably go. And I couldn't make a choice. And he said, one way or the other, this baby will be born tonight. And I was like, how did that just dawn on me 9 months pregnant? I was very aware that I was going to have a baby, but in that moment, I had to surrender to the fact that this baby was definitely going to be born tonight, and I had to choose how we were going to get him here. And from that moment on, it's been surrendering to everything that I'm not in control of. He's a senior this year. I'm going to miss him so much. I can't protect him from the things that are going to happen. He's going to have his own experiences and his own heartbreaks and his own triumphs, and I have to surrender to that. So what does it look like? We talk about this a lot in my community. And the best way I can describe it is this. If you've ever seen one of those salmon streams where the fish are jumping upstream, and they're just swimming against the current, and they're jumping and they're jumping and they're jumping. Picture yourself in a kayak and you're in the stream and you're kayaking up that stream, trying to go in the direction of the salmon. Have you ever been in a situation where it feels like that? And you're just like, why won't it work? I know this is my destiny. I know this is my calling. I know this is what I'm supposed to do. Nothing's working. I'm hitting brick walls everywhere I go. It's just so hard. Everyone's mad at me. My life is so difficult. Whatever your situation is. Have you felt that moment when you're kayaking up the stream and you just can't figure out why it has to be so hard? The surrender is the invitation to let the oar go. Just let it flow downstream. Lay back in the kayak and let it self-correct and turn itself around and float you down the stream. It's not first nature for human beings to continuously surrender and say, lead me, higher self, higher power, God, whatever you believe in. It's not in our nature to remember to ask for that guidance and invite that presence in and give that presence an invitation to intervene on our behalf consciously and often. That surrender is proof positive to your higher power that you're trusting it, that you're going to allow it to guide you. And I promise you, in the midst of the craziest moments in your life, when you choose to let go of suffering and choose surrender, even not understanding exactly what that means, miraculous things will unfold for you, and you will trust it more and more and more and more. Faith is hope with a track record. So if you practice with the little things, your faith will grow incrementally as your track record gets longer and longer and longer.
I love that analogy. Thank you for sharing that way. I've thought of it as something similar to that, but a little bit different. But I love that analogy of the salmon trying to swim upstream and then kayaking upstream. And then when we realize that all those rocks that are creating the white water are the rocks that we put in the river, that when we choose not to suffer, there aren't as many rocks either. When we turn that kayak around and go with the flow, it's not a rocky path. I'm not saying life's a lazy river, but it's definitely not tumultuous.
Yeah.
Let's talk for a moment how your life has changed. Again, I read your memoir, the transcript of your growing up and everything that you shared with me, and you had some tumultuous relationships. And I'm not saying there's still not challenges, but what really impressed me and touched my heart is when I met you for the first time and you told me your story about meeting Ron and how you that a new relationship was the furthest thing from your mind, and he was just so kind and maybe even different than you and what you expected in the past, but you found a happy place, and that gives people hope that that situations like that are possible. Tell us a little bit about the story then of your waitressing in that little cafe and you're approached by a gentleman for the white egg omelet and you're just not having that. You surrendered to that. I think it's a great story, can I say that I think it's a great love story, and you can tell us how it's going, but I just think there's some real sweetness in the lessons that you learned from that.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the space to tell this story really publicly. Yeah, so I was just working in this cafe and I was raising the boys and I was moving on to a different job, and I was creating this life where I would be able to actually take care of these two boys on my own, which felt really good to me. It felt really safe to be able to take care of the boys on my own and not have to rely on a partner, for a lot of reasons, mostly my childhood and my past relationships. So I was really getting to this point where I thought, gosh, I just don't need anyone at all. And I'm super happy exactly where we are. And I went to a different restaurant in the next town over to check out their menu. And Ron was there. He was behind me in line. I don't know if he had been there. Now I'm wondering if he had been there or if he saw me and ended up placing himself behind me in line. But he was having coffee and working. He spoke to me a couple of times and I could tell that he was trying to talk to me. And I was just like, oh, okay, that's really nice. Thank you. And I went back to my seat, waited for my food. And I was there with the owner of the cafe that I worked at. He went to the bathroom, and Ron came up and asked me more questions and asked about, I was wearing a hoodie and it said the Feedlot Cafe on it and cowgirl boots and jeans. And he was asking me about the cafe, and I said, no, I don't own it. I just help the owner. And he liked that. And he mentioned that he had a place to go fishing if I ever wanted to take my kids fishing. And I thought, okay, thank you. And he left his business card, and I was kind of like, thanks. And he went and sat down, and he was so nice and so kind, but I was just all the way done with having relationships and working through that, and really committed to just having a relationship with myself and the boys. So we finished our food and we left. And the next morning, this man pulls up in, a nice car, not a farm truck. And he's well dressed, not in farm clothes, in the literal middle of nowhere, Kansas. And I knew it was him. And he walked in and he sat right at the counter where I couldn't get away from him. And he ordered the egg white omelet. And I had this cook who is such a doll. She's so special to me, but she's rough, right? And she's not impressed. And she is not making an egg white omelet. That I had seen people order that in the past, and she would cuss and throw things, and she was not going to do that. So it was not going to happen. So I said, please don't order the egg white omelet. Just get the yolks in your omelet. It's good, healthy brain food. You'll be fine. And so he's like, okay, that sounds great. So he ate and asked me some questions, and we conversed back and forth a fair amount. And he asked if I would ever want to go to dinner. And I said, probably not, but thank you so much. You seem so nice. And, thank you. And so he left. And the most interesting thing happened. I felt like I was getting tapped on my shoulder all day long, like, hey. He ended up coming into my cafe on a Wednesday. And Wednesdays are the days that I had been driving to his city, which happens to be an hour and a half away from the cafe and away from where I lived. But it was the closest good women's meeting for the 12-step program that I'm in. So I had already been driving there every Wednesday for the last 3 years when he came in. And he came in on a Wednesday. And so I just had this little tapping on my shoulder going, hey, you're going to be in Pittsburgh tonight. You're going to be in Pittsburgh tonight. You should call him. You should call him and tell him you're going to be in Pittsburgh tonight. You can meet him after the meeting. And I was just trying to ignore it and thinking, no, we don't need to do that. So I get in my car and I start to head to the meeting, and I know that I need to message him. So I messaged him and said, hey, I'm going to be in Pittsburgh tonight. I'll be free from this time to this time. And if you'd like to meet, I will be there. So he said, great. He set up a place. And I asked for a place on a particular side of town so that I could get out of there quickly and go home to the boys. That did not happen. So I walked in and sat down just like this in front of him and just said, okay, well, I just left in a 12-step meeting. So that's me. And fully anticipated him being like, okay, you're not what I thought you were. And, getting up and leaving. And that's not what happened either. The long story short is we closed the restaurant. The way that he spoke indicated that he was a man who had been working on himself, and he did not need me to fix him. He didn't need me to be his mother or his counselor or emotional support girlfriend. He was fully capable of everything on his own. And I immediately respected that in him so much. When the food came, he asked if we could order food for my boys who were home. He prayed over their safety. He just did everything right. And I thought, okay, well, he did everything right. But that can't really be who he is all the time. And also, I think I shared this at the table, but I was a little concerned about, his aggressiveness and how if he would be aggressive. And he planted a kiss on me that night that had me calling my mama on the way home and saying, hey mom, I think I met the guy I'm gonna marry. And I could not make this up. Like, it's so true. And I was right. I did meet the man I was gonna marry, and he has not disappointed. He's just the most steady, loving, understanding, teammate, excited for everything that I do. And I'm weird. I am so out there. I've changed since we've been married. I've had at least, 3 or 5 lifetimes, where I just keep changing and doing weird things. And I'm out there, and I went from being a waitress in a small town to in sales and having a territory where my work looked a lot like his, to doing crazy tax strategy for the mega wealthy, to now doing all these things in beauty and fashion and pageantry and traveling all the time. And I've told him, I don't think you signed up for this. Thank you so much for everything you do to pick up the slack and take care of these kids and do the dishes and, all the things that I'm not here for when I'm out being fabulous. You didn't really know that was going to happen when you chose homegirl in the hoodie with the cowgirl boots on. And he says, I always saw it. I always knew that that's exactly who you are. And he's just pure. He's pure in his heart to serve and be in this partnership and continue to explore the possibilities of life and what that means together and separately. We both have our own ways of being, and we do our best to respect that in one another and give each other ample time to explore the world through your own lens, and then enjoy what we find together.
That is so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I just felt the goodness when you shared it. When you shared it for the first time with me. I know there's some lessons in that for me and for those that just listen to that story too. So many things to learn from that. So thank you for sharing that. I know that was very vulnerable, but you were then prepared to receive it, where perhaps years before that, you just weren't in a place or on that frequency to actually receive that. And you changed enough that then you could meet someone like that. How important is grace in these relationships that you're discovering?
It's everything. Grace is everything. Without it, we don't meet in the first place, do we? And learning to have that with each other for sure. But I think we focus on that a lot in relationships, and it always starts with ourselves. So the level to which I'm able to receive you and accept you and love you is in direct proportion to the level in which I love and accept and value and honor and cherish myself.
That's such an important concept. So you've been evolving, you've been growing. Recently, you were involved in something very exciting, and you shared some videos with me. I'd like to share a little video, and then I want you to talk about what that means to you. So set this up. This is the QBN in New York. You set it up. What is this? Then I'm going to play a little video, and then I want you to share with our viewers and listeners what it means. So set up the video we're about to share, where that affirmation comes on, and it talks about that in the background.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm so excited to share this with everyone. So in New York, at New York Fashion Week on September 7th, September 7th this year, 2024, we were able, with the Queen Beauty Network, which is something I'm a part of, and it's a streaming network, we were able to produce 2 fashion shows for 2 designers. One was LuLaRoe and one was Ricci, both out of the California area. If you've ever heard of them, they're fabulous. And I had this desire to really tell their story, not to just close down a runway and say, here you go, here's the clothes, here's the line, yay, aren't we fabulous? Yay, it was posh, it was, all these things. What it actually was us telling their story, and telling the story of Deanne, the founder and president, but also the story of all the women and all the men who have ever felt this way. And so it's basically talking about the things that are said to us that are sent to destroy us and keep us small and not vulnerable and keep us from showing up. And instead saying, no, you know what? I do have a voice. Here I am. So that's what the show is. We'll show you the first part, and I hope you enjoy.
They told me my only purpose was to be a mom.
They told me I was just a face.
They told me I was not good enough at anything.
They told me my only purpose was
They
to be a mom.
They told me I was just a face.
They told me I was not good enough.
And then I remembered, I have a voice.
I now release that which is not my own. I lay down the weight that doesn't belong to me, as well as the weight that does. I forgive all things, all people, and all others. I forgive myself. I cloak myself in a bright light of protection, impenetrable. I shed light to my shadows and lovingly work through all insecurities, flaws, and self-destructive habits that cause me not to flow in the ways in which I was created to. I honor those parts of myself, and I love them to life. Any and every soul tie is now disconnected. My mind is decluttered, and I see clearly those who no longer serve me and the mindsets attached to them. I take time for self-evaluation to uncover what in me connected me to that energy, and I heal my broken places. I take up space in my own life, and I unapologetically do the same in the rooms that I walk into. My light, my energy speaks for me before I ever open my mouth. I speak those things that are not as though they were, not as if they have never been, but I activate them with my light energy into being from obscurity. My vibration reverberates and pushes away any energy that is not on the same frequency. And I align, knowing that this is all that is required of me. I receive my power back. Ashe.
It is time that I call my power back. It is time that I call my power back.
Wow. I hope everyone will rewind that and listen to the affirmation soundtrack of that opening. Tell us what that means to you. Did you write that?
So I did not write that song. That song can be found. Let me see. Okay, the song is called I Call My Power Back by Joy Plus Soul.
Wow, that is so powerful.
Yeah. I heard that song and then I saved it and then just decided that I would like to use it on the runway for this purpose. And it was kind of interesting how it all came together. The show was happening. We knew who we wanted our show opener to be. And she actually had said, I was getting her story. And she said, and then I remembered I have a voice. And I thought, oh, that's a lot. You know, there's a lot there. And so this company, LuLaRoe, actually has just a depth of purpose and meaning and a mission to help women that I've just seen over and over and over again. And they're very earnest in that. So I took it very seriously to design a show for them that would be representative of what their core values are. And on this stage, really introduce them to the world as the meaningful clothing business that they are. They're so in alignment with me too, with the energy, and they're very adamant that this is not a clothing company, it's an energy company. And isn't that true for everything? We're all energy and we're all, you know, whatever it is that we specialize in, it's because we're focused on that type of energy. And we're offering our skill set around the mastery of that energy to others in the world. So, yeah, we created this show. I saw it in a vision, actually, and then had some of the LuLaRoe ladies record their voices and things that were said to them. And my own brother, who is a musician, actually mixed it and put it all together for us and, you know, wove the songs into each other so that we could tell the whole story all the way through. And I just couldn't be happier with how it came together, the models that were there. These were women we had never met before, most of them, and they were positively impacted by their presence working with us at New York Fashion Week. I mean, how does that happen? It happens because no matter where we are, we take us with us and we put our frequency onto every project that we touch. And I heard somebody say a few weeks ago, what you do for work, your job, is just the excuse you use to spread your love.
I love that.
Yeah. And so don't forget, as I'm talking about Fashion Week and working with designers and brands and photo shoots and flying all over the place, do not forget that I brought that same level of enthusiasm and energy to pouring coffee for dollar tips, because that was just as precious to me.
Robin, you are an angel, and I am so glad the universe chose to bring us on the same stage that day a few weeks ago. And I'll be forever grateful for how you've touched my life. And thank you for sharing your story and your insight and some great counsel today and some great advice to live by today.
Thank you, Coz. Thank you for bringing me on, for making this space and this time and this platform and this safe place to express love and share love with your audience and you, and hopefully this ripples out and people can really feel that, because if you guys don't know, Coz, you're filled with so much love and you have so much to offer the whole world. And I just hope the floodgates open and everyone's able to hear your message too, because it's so important and everything is love. So with that, namaste. Thank you for having me. I bless you all from the tops of your head to the bottom of your feet. May abundance flow everywhere you go.
Namaste. And to all of you listening and watching, keep smiling. Keep smiling. Keep shining brightly, because someone out there does need to be guided by your light.